Yeah, I think it's recording. Welcome everybody to our 120th Reading Online Sports Economics Seminar. It's good to see a good number of folk here, and it's good to have what I think is our first talk from the Czech Republic. I'm not sure we've had any before, as today marks another exciting first. We've got Ivan Trestcov, who's going to present on compliance behaviour under surveillance, introduction of the video assistant referee to European football. Before he starts, I do just want to do the usual flagging up of upcoming events in the real world, not on Microsoft Teams. As you'll hopefully be aware, Bernd is organising the 9th Western Football and Finance Conference, April the 21st and 22nd. The abstract deadline is the end of February. Send an email to Bernd. Bernd's here as well, so you can get his attention, but the email address is in the invite. There's also the 17th Gijón Conference on Sports Economics. The deadline for that is April 1st for abstracts, with the theme being Women Sport Economics. That's May the 5th and 6th, that conference. Then there's also the SESM conference in Budapest, Math Sport conference also in Budapest, and the North American Association of Sports Economics sessions at the Western Economic Association, all to look forward to, as well as the European Sports Economic Association conference in Cork in August. Please do look out for those, submit, and it'll be great to see some of you in person in the months to come. But for now, we have a really fascinating looking talk from Ivan. Ivan, you've got about an hour in which to talk, and there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers either during that or afterwards. But please do share your screen and take away your talk.
Okay, thanks for the introduction, James, and thanks for the invitation. It was really unexpected to receive this invitation, because I didn't know even that this paper was in general public access. So, but yeah, anyway, I think that's a great event with cool name, and I'm happy to present here. And also, quick mention that I haven't presented this paper for more than a year, so just upfront apologies if I will be slow at some times. And okay, let's get started, and you can interrupt me whenever you want, and we can discuss at any point. So I will talk today about video assistant referee introduction to European football and how it impacts compliance behavior of the players. And let's start with motivation for this paper, which I see as the fact that surveillance technology is spreading across the world, and we have more and more cameras on the street. And it was estimated that after 2021, it's already more than 1 billion cameras worldwide. And obviously, the leader in this race is China with their social credit system, which is crazy. But they're using machine learning techniques to see people on the streets, and if they behave good, they give them pluses, but minuses, and then they can not let them go out of the country or not give them loans. And it's not obvious what is link between more cameras and crime index. There is a debate in the literature, and this topic is very understudied, especially using some real-world data, because it's hard to get some causal impacts. Okay, so let's start from with the research questions. I have 3 main research questions for in this paper, and the first one is simple one: whether surveillance deter people from committing crime. And this question is studied well enough in the literature, and it goes back to a famous paper of Gary Baker in 1968, and he formalized in theory what is the economic model of crime. And the basic idea is that if we increase in monitoring power, so it can be more police on the street or more cameras in my case, then there is two forces that impact crime rates. First, crime rates increase because monitoring power was increased and we can catch more criminals. And second force is opposite. Crime rates decreasing because we deter criminals from committing crimes. So, and he called it monitoring effect and deterrence effect. And they're working in opposite directions. And it's well established that there is indeed a deterrence effect from increased monitoring power. For example, in those papers that I mentioned here, in Drago and Draka, they used really cool identification strategies with, I think, terrorist attack in London, and then this exogenous variation with unexpected increase in number of police on the streets. But in all those papers, they estimate this total effect, monitoring plus deterrence. And if they see negative a significant impact, then they say deterrence effect is prevailing, is dominating, and it is the evidence of deterrence effect. But what is, let's say, elasticity coefficient or like relation between monitoring power and deterrence is not clear. And in this paper, I am trying to disentangle those two impacts, monitoring and deterrence, and estimate clean deterrence effect. Second question is about, so it is established that there is deterrence effect and people are deterred from increased monitoring power. But what happens when we catch a criminal and punish him, whether deterrence will be increased or not? So, and the idea is that first, when increased monitoring power is introduced, whether it's more police or cameras, people, they don't really know what's the actual probability of being detected, of being arrested. So they have some subjective approximations, and maybe cameras don't work. Maybe it's not really enough police to catch me. But after being punished, they can adjust it and probably increase it, because yeah, now they know at least that cameras work. And it's hard to isolate this, it's called in the literature a specific deterrence effect or learning by punishment effect. And it's hard to isolate this specific additional impact of punishment. And I will show you later why in this setting it's isolated. And the third question is what happens after you going out of monitoring environment. So you're under camera, you're deterred, you start and behaving better, but what happens when you go out? So will you still behave good, or you go back to your criminal behavior? And if I will see that this deterrence effect persists even outside of monitoring environment, I will call it spillover effect. And yeah, the question is whether it exists. And I will not talk about results upfront. I know it's conventional in academia presentations, but last week we had trainings in my job on giving presentations, and they told us that to increase dopamine level of the listeners, you need to have some mystery and suspense. So I will keep the results to the end. And now let's go to some history of this topic. So this is not the first paper that testing this Baker economic model of crime using sports data. McCormick in 1984 started it, and that was really a cool paper published in Journal of Political Economy. And he proposed the idea that we can treat players as potential criminals, and they're committing crimes, but it's actually false in the game. And we can treat also referees as police officers. And he used NCAA data, so student basketball, and they had experiment of adding in half of the games additional referee. So it was 2, and then they added a third one. And so he was estimating what's the impact of this additional referee, increased monitoring power, and he found again this prevailing deterrence effect. And there were a couple more papers using the same approach with Levitt in 2002, did it with NHL. And I saw also one paper with NFL. And in this paper, I'm using setting of European football. And instead of additional referee, I'm using introduction of video assistant referee. And later I will tell you why this setting is different and why it's interesting to study it. Yeah, so this presentation was prepared for general public, and I'm sure that you know all the terms, like what's penalty and what's yellow and red cards. And surely you also know that video assistant referee is video footage technology that helps officiating the games with the help of video reviews. And I will just mention some specific details that it can review only for events, goals, penalties, red cards, and offsides. And in this paper, I will focus on penalties and red cards. And also I had a video which I will not show you. Yeah, and so experimental phase of video assistant referee started in 2014, but officially it was introduced in the law of the game in 2017, and 4 national leagues started to fully use it in season 2017-18. It's Germany, Italy, Poland, and Portugal. And then it spread it across Europe and the world, and now even second-tier leagues use it. And in this study, I will focus only on one league. It's Germany, and I will use data on 2 tiers, so Bundesliga 1 and Bundesliga 2. And in the first one, it was introduced. In the second one, it was not introduced. And I will end the data on this season, the first season of introduction. Also, another important fact about VR. So there was a study by KU Leuven, 2018, and they were estimating what's the increase in accuracy, and they evaluated that accuracy increased to almost 100%. So now it's really hard to escape punishment. So you will be caught anyway. Only 1% cases, maybe not. And yeah, that's all about. No, it's not all about her. Okay. What else is very important? So for this study, the crucial protocol rule is the timing how VAR decision is made. So it's working in the following way. First, head referee make initial decision, and he cannot make no decision. It will be foul or not foul, and he should do it as if there was no VR. So, and they were trained to behave as there is no VAR. And only then, after initial decision was made, VR can intervene in the game and ask referee to review the moment, and then it can be confirmed or overturned. And yes, this is the big assumption of this paper, that referees, they behave in the same way as they behaved before VR introduction. And first argument is this protocol rule. but of course it's just a rule, and you can write whatever you want, but in reality probably their behavior will change. So I tried to do some formal check. What I did, I looked at the Bundesliga 2, where VR wasn't introduced until 2018, and I did this difference regression, and treatment effect is whether referee officiated games with VR, because some referees, they officiate games in both leagues, in Bundesliga 1 and in Bundesliga 2. So some of them were exposed to VR in 2017-2018 season, and then officiated games in Bundesliga 2. And I was comparing, so control group is referees who were never exposed to VR, and treatment group is referees who were exposed in Bundesliga 1. And I found no significant differences in number of fouls they called. And also, like a couple months ago, I found a paper which focuses exactly on the behavior of referees after VR introduction, and they also didn't found any significant changes in the behavior. Now I will talk about why this setting is interesting, and what's the relation with and how this setting is different from the literature, and how it can help me to answer my research questions. So first research question was about this disentangling monitoring effect and deterrence effect. And advantage of this setting is in timing. So we have this rare opportunity to see what would be the decision of referee without VR, so this initial decision, and what is the decision after review. So this decision after review, we can say that it's monitoring power. So we know what decision would be and what it is. And the difference is increase in monitoring power. And another important thing is that there was really huge impact on number of fouls. So 26% of all detected penalties in this season was detected because of VR. So it's huge increase, and it's great because, for example, in Levitt paper in NHL, he didn't find deterrence effect, and he said that the impact of additional referee in NHL was not enough to drive a deterrence force, but here we have really huge increase in monitoring power. And there might be two errors that referees can make: no foul converted to foul, and foul converted to no foul. So even if there was no foul, VR can interrupt the game and ask referee to review the moment, and then this no foul will be converted to foul. Regarding second research question, so learning by punishment, or so-called specific deterrence effect. So it is established in the literature that there is this adjusting subjective probability of being detected after punishment, but it's hard to isolate this channel of punishment on deterrence, because for example, if you're incapacitated for 5 years in prison, then you go out, you're a completely different person. You aged, there were some criminogenic peer effects in prison, and also there might be some additional income effects from the punishment. Also, punishments usually in real world are increasing in severity. So if you commit crimes the first time, it will be 1 year of prison. Second time, it will be 5 years. So and to isolate the impact, punishment should be constant. So in this setting, it's constant. Penalty is always a penalty. It's pretty regular. We can see it almost once in 2 or 3 games. And it's not severe, so even if you are punished by penalty, after penalty, you're still the same person. And the last one, why this setting is interesting, is because we can estimate the spillover effect, the effect outside of a surveillance environment, outside of VR. And what helped me to estimate it is that there are parallel competition, international ones, Champions League and Europe League. So, and VR wasn't introduced in those international competitions in season 2017-2018. It was 1 year after in Champions League and 2 years after in Europe League. So we can observe players who played in their national leagues with VR, and then they played in Champions League without VR. So we can compare. Control group will be players from non-VR national leagues, and treatment group will be players from VR league. So Germany, Portugal, Poland, and Italy. And if they start committing fewer fouls after VR introduction, then we could say that that's the evidence of the spillover effect. So as I said, I'm using German football data from 2015-2018 years. VR was introduced in 2017-18, so I have 2 years before introduction and 1 year after introduction. And I use as control group Bundesliga 2, where VR wasn't introduced at all in this time span, and Bundesliga 1 is treatment group, where it was introduced in the last season. And for the last research question, I'm using 2 international competitions, Champions League and Europe League, and both of those did not use VR in 2015-2018. And I'm comparing teams from VR competitions versus non-VR competitions. And first of all, because I'm using difference in difference approach, it's good practice to establish parallel pre-trends. And to do this, I'm doing this event study approach on aggregated data. So I aggregated it on 7 or 4 weeks. And treatment variable of interest is number of games or weeks that player was exposed to VR. And this is the result. So we don't see any trend before VR introduction. It fluctuates around 0 with pretty huge standard errors. And pre-introduction mean average treatment effect is close to 0, not significant. And immediately after, for severe fouls, it's yellow cards or red cards, it goes down and it stays down. So, and post VR, mean average treatment effect is minus 0.3, which was significant. And also I did the same for penalties. And for penalties, it's more interesting picture. So it's also fluctuates around 0 and not significant before VR introduction. After VR introduction, for some time, it's also around 0. But after 12 weeks, we start see this downtrend, and it stays down after 12 weeks. So there is some adjustment period after introduction when they start committing fewer penalty fouls. And I will talk about what's the possible mechanism for this adjustment period later. Yeah, so this is just takeaways that yeah, we confirmed parallel pre-trends because before introduction it fluctuates around 0, and for severe fouls, we can see immediate impact after introduction on the number of fouls. And for penalties, it is also negative, but after some adjustment period of 12 weeks. And now let's go to main empirical strategy, which is difference in difference. And our outcome variable is number of committed fouls by player. So I have player level data, and I will use penalties and severe fouls, which is yellow or red card. Our treatment variable is if this game is played under VR, under surveillance. And for learning by punishment effect, I'm including variable which takes 1 if player was punished before game T. And also I'm including plenty of fixed effects for ear, competition, player, opponent team, and referee, and a bunch of controls. So let's look at the first results, and this relates to the first research question, whether there is deterrence effect from increased monitoring power. And first, what we can do, we can estimate this difference in difference on final referee decision. So after VR introduced and changed it. And we can see interesting patterns that actually in this case, monitoring effect prevails. So we have positive impact on VR, and it happens because we have really huge increase in monitoring power. But after adjustment periods for 12 games, and this confirms event study for penalty kicks, we can see that now deterrence effect prevails. And for severe fouls, again confirming event study, it starts immediately. So significant deterrence effect immediately after VR introduction. Next, we can clean the data from VR decisions. So we can analyze only initial referee decisions without VR. And after cleaning data from monitoring effect, we no longer see positive coefficient on VR introduction, and cleaned deterrence effect for severe fouls increased and stayed the same for penalty kicks after some adjustment period. So to summarize the results for the first part, there is a significant impact on compliance behavior, and VR drastically increased number of detected penalties. It was increased by 35%, and we can say that this is monitoring effect, 35% increase in crime rates, let's say. And there is heterogeneous behavior of players dependent on type of fouls. So for yellow and red cards, we have immediate impact, immediate deterrence effect, and they committing 14% fewer fouls immediately after introduction. And for penalties, there is this lag, delayed impact of 12 weeks, and after 12 weeks, they start committing 12% fewer penalties. So we can estimate this elasticity coefficient of monitoring to deterrence as 3-to-1 increase.
Hi,
yep.
If I can interrupt you, Rob Simmons has got a hand up for his question.
Sure.
Yeah, this is really interesting. Can you distinguish between handball and actual fouls inside the penalty area? Would you have that data? Because those strike me as sort of very different and actually difficult decisions for both the referee and the VAR.
No, in this data, I don't have, unfortunately, type of fouls. But yeah, it's a good point. So actually, I have a comment here that I need to include type of fouls in the penalty area, because yeah, I know that a huge portion of the penalties detected by VAR was handballs. You're right, and that's actually one of the reasons why I think there is this adjustment period for 12 fix, because you need to learn how to play with VAR. You start, and I noticed that players start to put their hands behind their back, for example, inside when they play inside penalty area, and you need to adjust, because it's easy to start just play softer, not to break legs, and that's why this impact of on yellow and red cards is immediate. So they started to play softer, but to learn how to play good inside penalty box area might be more difficult. But yeah, good points that it will be great to distinguish between different types of fouls. Okay. So yeah, I explained why I'm thinking is the mechanism for this delayed impact for penalties versus severe fouls, and yeah, we can discuss what do you think later. So now let's go to learning by punishment impact. For this, I added to the regression additional variables, which takes one if player was punished, and it can be punished by red card or punished by penalty. And also I played around a little bit. So first you can say, yes, you can learn from your own mistakes. Second, you might learn from mistakes of others. So, and it can be your teammates or players from opponent team. So I was also adding if player witnessed his teammate being punished or any player from in this game was punished. And also I had two specifications. So the first specification is column 1 and 3. It's the same as previous regression, and columns 2 and 4. I took just one season of Bundesliga 1 VAR season. So all the games were officiated with VAR. And what gives me this exogenous variation to estimate this causal impact is timing. So player can be punished in the first week, it can be punished in the 7th week, and it's kind of random. So that can help to estimate this causal link. And in both specifications, I find that there is additional deterrence effect from being punished by VAR. So if player experienced punishment, he start committing even fewer fouls, whether it was a red card or it was a penalty here. And there is no strong evidence of learning from other mistakes somehow. Only weak evidence in one specification here. We can see additional learning effect from witnessing any player in this game was punished, but it was only in one specification. And it increases significantly, so 5 times less fouls committed after being punished for red cards, and around 100% for penalties. And the last results are about spillover effect. So what happens outside of monitoring environment? So they're playing in Germany or Italy and Portugal with VAR. Now they have a game in Champions League. Whether they will continue to play softly to commit fewer fouls. And what was amazing to find the same pattern. So the pattern is totally the same. For severe fouls, we can see immediate impact. So players from VR competition commit fewer fouls even in the international competitions. And the result is mostly driven by Germany. And for penalty kick fouls, it's not significant overall. But if we include this adjustment period for 20 games in this case, we start finding this significant deterrence effect. So what if players played more than 20 games with VR in their national competitions, they start committing fewer fouls also in international competitions. So let's summarize last two results. First, I'm finding the specific deterrence effect or learning by punishment effect, and it's huge, and mostly it's driven if player was punished himself, not his teammates or other players. But there is weak evidence that we still can learn from other people's mistakes. So in one specification, it was significant also for witnessing other players. And also I'm finding that this deterrence effect, it persists even outside of video surveillance. So even in international competitions, we can see that those players commit fewer fouls. And so why this happens? Like why they don't switch between good and bad behavior? So I'm thinking that it can be caused by switching costs. So you're under the camera, you changed your behavior, and to change it back, you might pay some I don't know, mental costs. So and then you will need to change it back to good behavior when you go back to your national competition. So probably the best strategy is to choose one behavior and stick to it everywhere. Then it will be zero costs. And yeah, in national competitions, it is forced to play softly. So, and then you will play softly everywhere. Yeah, and that's basically it. So let's conclude. I exploited this. So at the time I was writing the paper, it was novel setting. Now there are a lot of papers on VR introduction to European football, and I found this setting is really interesting because it provided three rare opportunities. So first, it allowed to disentangle deterrence and monitoring effect in the Baker economic model of crime. So I was able to estimate this clean deterrence effect. Second, it allows to estimate this understudied in the real world data learning by punishment effect with really isolated impact of punishment. And third, it allows to estimate spillover effect. And spillover effect, I actually haven't seen any papers, especially with individual data, estimating this effect outside of monitoring environment. And yeah, my evidence suggests that there is strong deterrence effect. The elasticity coefficient is approximately 3 to 1. We're increasing monitoring power by 30%, and we have 10% deterrence effect. There is it intensifies after punishment. So there is learning by punishment effect, and it persists even outside of the monitoring environment. So yeah, it was faster than James wanted, but we can discuss it now.
Sure. Thank you very much, Ivan. My preferences, I don't have any preferences. You presented a very good presentation, fascinating talk in 40 minutes rather than 60, and that's absolutely fine. More time for discussion, Q&A. So we'll open up the floor, and if people have any questions, please do raise your hands. While people do that, I guess I will ask a question. I presume I probably missed this. You have things like player fixed effects and other things, team fixed effects, when you run these regressions, such that it couldn't be the case that the German teams are playing against weaker sides in Europe than they would do in the domestic league, and that might explain why some of the patterns that you see. Is that possible?
You mean in the spillover effect, like in this international competition? So your idea is that German leagues, they play versus weaker teams?
No, well, I mean, it's just an idea. It might be that the German teams don't commit as many fouls or give away as many penalties in the European games because they're often playing against weaker teams than they might play against in domestic competition.
But we like observe the same German teams even before VAR introduction. So we are comparing them to themselves because the data is from 2015. So we have 2 years before and 1 year after. So
okay, yeah, good point. Yeah.
It's counted.
Alex has put something in the chat. He says he's having technical problems. Is it possible that there are other differences between Bundesliga 1 and Bundesliga 2? For example, the incentives differ between the leagues in terms of participation in the Champions League. There was a change in these years where more German teams entered automatically into the Champions League. Could that affect the results, do you think?
And this is related to, again, to Champions League results or to the National League. So if to the National League, again, we have 2 years before, and we have like this team fixed effects. So we'll compare again the same team to itself in the future, before and after introduction, and like this difference also in Bundesliga 2 teams will also have before and after for Bundesliga, and then we have this difference in difference estimation. But if you can elaborate on this question, yeah.
I think Alex is suggesting that the incentives for players in the Bundesliga 1 changes in the sample period because there's one additional Champions League place available in the time period. So in different seasons, you've got different prizes at stake.
Okay, yeah, but it's could be, but I think it's it can affect in a very insignificant way, because it's only, I think it's only one place, right? Additional place, and it happened in 2017, 2018, like they added.
Alex might confirm or deny. I don't have that detailed knowledge.
Yeah, but anyway, what helps to mitigate this concern is that I have also season fixed effect. So I have the effect for a particular season, 2017-18, and all the unexpected shocks that have happened for all the teams in this season, they are accounted.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Other questions and comments? Comment more than a question, but you said that the VAR introduction led to fewer penalties, and an observation that I think people were focusing on, certainly at the start of the World Cup, was that the edition in 2022 and also 2018 had more penalties than previous World Cups, with those 2 World Cups coincidentally having VAR. So it's totally an observation. You know, it's very casual relative to your much more detailed investigation.
Yeah, that's true. And so if we look at the first result, so this final referee decision with VAR reviews. So we can see increase in number of penalties, but this is due to monitoring impact. So we increase monitoring power a lot, and that's why we see more penalties. But when we look at the initial referee decisions without VAR introduction, then we can see that players are deterred to commit fouls. But like if we combine two, we will see positive, but this is like two forces working together. Yeah.
That's good, thank you. Daniel has his hand up with a question.
Yes, hi. Very interesting work. Actually, I was curious not just about the amount of penalties, but like, say, number of goals. From the point of view of sort of a social welfare function, let's say that these are the spectators that want to enjoy an entertaining game. So you have, fewer criminals or criminals that are deterred, but is it the case that there are just like, too many policemen on the street and it's just like not an enjoyable experience anymore? And it looks as if, from the from the results, I think the previous table that you had, that it seems that, after 12 weeks, defenders adjust almost completely so that the number of penalties goes down. So are they now worse defenders and allowing more goals? I'm sure we know something about it, and maybe it's confounded by a lot of other sort of trends that are happening in world football that make it difficult to identify that. But I was wondering if you can say anything to that.
Well, yeah, it's definitely interesting. Probably out of scope for this paper. I think so. They are kind of better defenders because now they allow less penalties, right? And they concede less goals because of penalties.
Right, but maybe they're conceding more goals by not fouling or by not making that sort of quasi-foul that maybe would have gone undetected, and just allowing the player to shoot. And
yeah, that's interesting. And actually, I was even thinking about like developing some theoretical background in this like game theory, whether like sometimes it can be optimal to foul, right? If probability to score the goal, for example, is less than probability to score the goal from penalty, it will be optimal to foul. And yeah, it's interesting question. But for this particular paper, goals were not. The rules for goals and offsides a little bit different than for penalties and red cards, because, for example, for offsides, they can give no call, and they can let players to continue the game, and then they will just look at the VAR. And for goals, I think the same. They can just check whether they scored or not. But yeah, definitely interesting question, and maybe I will use this data to elaborate on this. Thanks for the suggestion.
More questions and comments? I might not have understood your distinction between fouls and penalties and goals and offsides, because as you say, well, an offside would only be reviewed or not if it ended up with a goal, wouldn't it? And similarly, a foul in the penalty area, if it wasn't given as a penalty, it would still be reviewed. So the referee could give a non-decision and it would still be reviewed.
So for penalty, if there was no call, it means it's a decision, no penalty. And they are not allowed to give no decision. So it's either penalty or not penalty. And for offsides, they can have this no decision, like, because if they did mistake and say it was offside, and then it interrupted the game and it was mistake, then probably they could score the goal, and that's why they're allowed not to give no decision call for offsides.
We'll have plenty of time for any more questions or comments that folk might have. Well, I think that means that we've exhausted all the discussion. So I guess we can just say thank you, Ivan. It was a really interesting paper, nicely executed, looking at a really interesting setting. So thank you very much for that. We will meet again next week. Next week, we're going to have Oliver Budzinski from the Ilmenau University of Technology presenting again on football. There's no bias here, honest, but we have demand for TV broadcasts of UEFA Champions League games in Danish television, the impact of uncertainty of outcome, stardom, and local heroes. So that's next week. Do look forward to seeing you all again then. And in the meantime, wish you all a fantastic weekend. Thank you for your presentation, Ivan. Thank you for discussion and comments, everyone. See you again very soon.
Thanks for the invitation again.
Cheers, Ivan.